We are live. Hello, I'm Carolyn J. Carpenter, one of the founders of Hollywood Gatekeepers. I'm very excited to be with you today. We are talking about story. We're doing all kinds of things about story. We are closing out the year with some really cool stuff about story. So we will be doing some trainings moving forward. And today we are going to talk about obstacles. Wah, wah, wah. We're going to talk about obstacles in a screenplay. We're going to break it into three categories. Obstacles in a screenplay, like what are obstacles that prevent stories from moving forward? Like what is an obstacle, like not an intentional obstacle, right? What is an obstacle that stops the story from moving forward, that actually hurts a screenplay? What is an obstacle for a writer? That's category number two. Like what stops writers from writing? As readers, we are always, when I do these trainings, we are coming from a reader's perspective. I have been a reader for a very long time. I've read over 11,000 screenplays, and we are going to talk about obstacles from a reader's perspective. And the third category will be the protagonist. We're going to talk about obstacles for the protagonist and how after we go through the obstacles that are in a story and we go through the obstacles that are in your life, how much easier it is to come up with obstacles for your protagonist. So there will be a handout that will be attached to this. I will walk through it with you today, and we will dive into story. If you have comments, questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have about anything. I am focusing in on the obstacles in a story today, but all questions are always welcome here. I always want you to feel like, you have a place you can get your questions answered right here. Again, I'm Carolyn J. Carpenter. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's get started, shall we? So I'm going to share my screen. Hold on. She says with confidence. They've moved the share button. That's not it. Hold on one second. There's no share. All right. Well, I guess I won't share my screen. That's very strange. That's new. So there's always new things all the time whenever you're doing different platforms. We just did one last week and there was a share button. Let me try this. Oh, there we go. I found it. All right. Persistence. That's another topic that we do a lot. I just demonstrated it right there. All right, there we go. Now we are sharing. It's just very simple bullet points, right? At the bottom, you'll see that it has our logo so that you know where you're getting it from. And then it also has a link that I'm going to share with you in a moment. But I just wanted to, give you something that was really straight ahead. Although as you look at these categories, it might seem like, wait, what? So let's go through it, right? So obstacles in a screenplay. And by obstacles in a screenplay, I will talk about this, but right now I'm not talking about the obstacles that are intentional that a writer is putting in a screenplay so that a protagonist will have something to fight against. That's not what I'm referring to right now. I'm referring to obstacles that will hurt your story. Like what are some of the things that prevent a story from moving forward? So I'm making sure that I'm making sure I'm sharing and you can see it. Hold on one sec. I'll make sure I can see your comments. There we go. Awesome. I love it, Susan. You're a screenwriter willing to learn about this business. You always wanted to do this for years, but couldn't afford a computer. You're glad that you enrolled in the class now. Hooray, it's never too late to learn. Absolutely. Never too late to learn, never too late to write a screenplay, never too late to do any of it. It's all here and it's all available to you. And I'm super excited that you're here with us today. So as we talk about obstacles within a screenplay, I'm referring to things that prevent a story from working correctly. So some of those are like story structure, things like within story structure, obstacles that hurt the screenplay. And we'll talk about obstacles for protagonists, as you can see towards the end there. So too many subplots is one of the things that will be an obstacle for the screenplay having a solid story. Readers focus on story. I mean, one of our primary focuses is the story. We help with all kinds of things. We help a writer format their screenplay. We help a writer. We want to make sure that everything looks good, all of that. But we are kind of the only one that's really focused on story. Now, everybody talks about story, but a producer has to sell the script. So they're looking at, can they package it and all the, are there good characters? The character arc is really important. An actor obviously comes in and that's pretty much really what they're focused on. Does my character arc work? Is this project worth me considering because of this character arc? Do I want to play this character? Right. So there's people are considering different things. Writers, have the whole thing on their plate. Readers focus in on, does this story work and we are analysts. So we're not editing the story. We're not necessarily proofreading for typos and that kind of thing. We're saying, as an analyst, does this story work? And so when you have too many subplots, that's one of the things that can be an obstacle for the story working correctly. And so if you have too many subplots, and this is a very common thing, you see it sometimes in movies, but you see it a lot in screenplays. And part of it is because writers, especially someone, if you're reading for contests, those of our readers that read for contests, you know what I'm talking about here. When you read screenplays for contests and you have younger writers, meaning not age-wise, but haven't written that many screenplays, they have a tendency to want to tell the story of all the people in it. They want to create subplots around all of their characters. They fall in love with their characters and they want you to know all about them. And so sometimes a story can get derailed by a subplot. And that has to do, we're going to talk about domineering characters later, but this has to do with really wanting to flush out all of these characters. And you do want well-rounded characters, but sometimes that can result into what I call squirrel syndrome, where you're often running down a whole tangent with this subplot that isn't supporting the protagonist. The subplots all should be focused on that protagonist in some way. There's some reason for this subplot that is driving the protagonist's story. If it's not doing that, if it's a story on its own, then you either have screenplays that are mashed together, you need to pull that subplot and write that story, or you have an ensemble piece, you're not quite aware of it yet. Those are some of the answers to that. But too many subplots will be an obstacle to that story arc really, really having a great arc, really having a good build and momentum. A lot of subplots can really hurt that. And then the same is true with characters. And these go hand in hand, obviously, because if you have too many characters, you're going to have more subplots because you're going to try to be explaining them. And, I often talk about how a reader can look at a screenplay and we can know just by scrolling through the screenplay, like, is it on track? And one of the things that is a red flag is if we see, so when a character is introduced into a screenplay, they're in all caps for the first time only. So when you see a character in a description and someone enters the scene, if it's the first time we're seeing them, then their name is in all caps for just that one time, for that entrance. And then in the dialogue, it's always capitalized, but in the description. So if you're scrolling through and you're looking at a screenplay and like every page has a new character being introduced, it's like, oh boy. Here we go. So it means, that there's a lot of characters to keep track of. And some people do things like they name characters similar things, which really makes it hard to where, it's really hard to keep track of everybody. And so having too many characters can really derail things and really be an obstacle to that story working. So you want to make sure that the characters, again, are supporting that protagonist. And so having too many characters is different than having an ensemble piece. Sometimes we don't mean to write an ensemble piece. And we actually did a live reading of one of the writers that we've helped in our programs. And well, we read some pages. And so everybody was looking at these pages and everyone loved the supporting character more than the protagonist. And so the dilemma for the writer became, okay, I've got this character that everybody's really engaged with. Should I flip this and make this their story? When you read a screenplay, when you watch a movie, you should know whose story is this. If you walk away going, well, I don't know, is this, it should be one character, unless it's an ensemble, it should be one character and it's their story. If it's muddy, then there's some problems there and that will be an obstacle to the story arc really working, right? If you find that you can't really tell, perhaps you have an ensemble piece in your midst here. So if you look at it and there's all kinds of characters that are coming to the circus, they're coming to the circus because that's what it's like. They're coming to the surface and they're like taking over the story. These are all things to consider. So as this writer was trying to consider, okay, everybody loves the supporting character. And then her next draft, she went through and she really developed that sub character because everybody liked it so much. And then it really was unclear of whose story it is. Like she totally lost her protagonist. And I still think to this day that the story did belong to the protagonist, but she got sidetracked, which is an obstacle, right? That's part of squirrel syndrome, to get sidetracked on a character that you love. And so there's a few things that you can do about this. You can take that character out and you can use them somewhere else. So Doug, my writing partner, Doug Shaner, and I, he's also one of the founders of Hollywood Gatekeepers. We wrote a screenplay based on a character that I wrote that was in a play. So I wrote a play, it had a character in it, and she had this just really outrageous monologue. We had an actress play this role in the play, and she just made so much, she made that monologue come alive in a way that I didn't even see. And it was so beautiful the way that she did it, that then suddenly that character became such a good character that we took that character and put it in 2 different screenplays. So we named it different things, but we took the bones of that character, as you might say, and we used it. So when you find a character, because that character had a voice that I think was a big part of me. And so I loved her. She was just, a big part of me. She was a little crazy. But she was really outrageous, and she was very true. Like the way that she looked at the world was like she tripped through her life because she couldn't quite accept that the world couldn't be more beautiful. And so she was constantly failing at things because she just was reaching so big, but didn't have the capacity, like we teach here, how to manage your mind. And so she's a really great character. So I've used her in many different things. So if you have a character, and I think in this scenario that I was talking about with this writer that had this really great sub character, sometimes a sub character will come out. Frasier is a great example of that in Cheers, right? You see spinoffs all the time of a character that really, kind of walked away with the series. And so you had Cheers that was on for a really long time, and Frasier was such a different character than the rest of them. And he came in and he was so compelling. And then that series was very successful, back around for round 2 now. So it's like, when you have a character that's like that, you can easily take them out and use them in something else. If they're hurting your current screenplay, the thing that worked about Frasier is that he came on well into the series, right? So he gave new life to the series. He came on and he was such a great love interest with Shelley Long's character. And it was like, this became just such a great springboard for him. I don't know if he would have worked quite as well if he had come on and one of the original characters, right? But in a screenplay, when you have a character that's domineering like that, can you take that character out and do something different? When you look at Forgetting Sarah Marshall, there's this great subplot that's happening between Russell Brand and Jonah Hill, and their chemistry is amazing. So much so, welcome getting to the Greek, right? So this can happen. And when you look at that subplot inside of Forgetting Sarah Marshall, it enhances the story. It doesn't distract from what's going on. It enhances the situation because it helps reflect back what kind of person Russell Brand's character is, and how he relates to this up and coming, young fan. How he relates to him really shows a mirror to who he is. And so it really supports which then supports the relationship they have, which then supports Jason Segel's relationship. So it's very layered. It's brilliant, right? And so you can layer things like that. But if they went off on a huge getting to the Greek subplot with these 2 characters, and in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, that never would have worked, right? But if you take it out and start something new, you definitely could do that, right? So you can also combine characters. If you find that some characters are, you see the same 2 characters that are kind of saying the same things, maybe that's one character. And so kind of looking at, are there ways that you can combine certain character? Would a character, even if they seem at odds a bit, would one character be more compelling and interesting if they represented 2 sides that currently 2 characters are representing? Can you look at that? And when you're reading a screenplay as a reader, that'll start to pop out to you. Times that you can see 2 characters and then be like, you know what, these might be better as one character struggling with conflict. Sometimes you can take one of those supporting characters and they sort of become the devil's advocate inside of the protagonist. Like maybe that voice of doubt that this character is providing could actually be the voice of doubt that the protagonist is struggling with. So go ahead and write all the characters, and then you can kind of go back and look at which voices do I want to lean on, which voices will help move that story forward, which voices aren't becoming obstacles in terms of running away with the story. Instead, they're always, always, always supporting that protagonist. So you might also get a domineering character that's controlling every scene. And if you don't know what upstaging is, so upstaging this is more in the theater, but it can happen in a screenplay as well. So if someone's there's action is happening, in front of the audience, and there's a character that's kind of in the back. And if so let's say the person's doing a dramatic scene and the character up and back takes off all their clothes, they're upstaging because everyone's going to be focusing on that person behind. It's upstage. So the back of the theater is called the upstage. You upstage and downstage. And if you're upstage and you're behind the main action, but you do something crazy, that's called upstaging. And so you'll see it sometimes. You see it all the time, all over TikTok and stuff, where they're showing one thing, but then the dog comes in the screen or whatever and upstages everybody. So it's when our focus is pulled. So if you have a character that's constantly pulling focus away from what you need to happen, we need this thing in the story to move forward with the protagonist, but we have this character that keeps coming and interrupting and pulling our focus, then that character is upstaging, and it's a domineering character that isn't helping move the story forward. It becomes an obstacle. Now, once you understand that it's an obstacle, that could be a really great thing for the protagonist. It could be a thing that the protagonist is fighting against, and then you can be intentional about it. It's when it's unintentional. It's when, it's when it's unintentional that it becomes a problem, right? And so you want to make sure that you try to control those characters so that they're not dominating. And so it becomes very intentional of how you're using them. So you also need to be aware of a bias that could become an obstacle in your story. If you have a protagonist that's supposed to be on a certain journey, and they need to do things that you don't necessarily agree with as a reader. If you're reading something and you have a bias against something that's happening in the screenplay, that can be an obstacle where your coverage is going to hurt that story because of your bias. So as a writer as well, we put our biases often into the characters that we create. We have them express our opinions sometimes. And even sometimes we have the other side of the story where it would be an antagonist or is supposed to be expressing the other side. Sometimes we don't do that as well because of our bias. So being aware of what your bias is as a writer and being aware, can you craft a character that you don't necessarily like or agree with so that they become very different than the characters that you have? And as a reader, you definitely need to check your bias at the door. If you find that you're reading a screenplay that completely and totally offends you, then you're not the right reader for that screenplay. Now, we don't want your coverage to be all about how that writer is wrong because you don't disagree with their story. Now, if the character isn't getting the story across and that it's just becoming sort of offensive for offensiveness sake, then it's something you can comment on. And it's something you're always coming from a perspective as a reader, at least a reader that we train. You're coming from a perspective of really wanting to help that writer, really wanting to champion that writer. And if you really feel like that writer is not going to move forward because of some bias that they're having in their screenplay, you can comment on it. But if you feel like you're just offended and you can't get behind it, then maybe that person needs a different reader that will come in and talk to them about how the bias is working and see, can they get that across in a way that makes it so the characters are the ones. Sometimes it doesn't look like the character has a bias. It looks like the writer has a bias. It's a fine line, but it makes a huge difference. And so it has to do with, it's pretty straight ahead. It has to do with what's in the description, how the description is coming across versus what the characters are saying. So if the bias is really clear in the description, it's distracting, right? It's an obstacle. It makes it so that you're not involved in the protagonist story anymore. You're only sitting there thinking about the writer and the writer at the page. When we're reading a screenplay, we never want to picture the writer writing that screenplay. We only want to picture the characters in the things that we're doing. Just like when a producer reads your coverage as a reader, they never want to picture the reader sitting there reading a screenplay, talking about a screenplay, talking about how smart they are, all of those things. They only want to picture the story. So it's your job to take yourself out of it, show what the story is about, show what works and doesn't work in that story without it being about you as a reader. And so bias can become really, really important. Lack of focus and too many themes, these things kind of go together. So if a story isn't focused, you see how they all kind of go together? When we're not focused, then those domineering characters are taking over. There's too many subplots. We're going like all over the place. I didn't even put in genre jumping, which is something we talk about all the time, which is where if you have a story that's going along and sometimes you can feel that the writer is almost bored with their own story. So they genre jump, they pull in, usually it has to do with violence and it's the best example to give. You've got this story that's maybe a drama and then suddenly halfway through someone violently gets murdered. And it's like, whoa, we just suddenly were a horror film. And so if that hasn't been set, if that hasn't been set up, then it might not work, right? Let me grab a sip of water here. Sorry. think it's the fall, all the fall leaves. So having that lack of focus, again, these all fit together. You want to really focus on that protagonist story and is it going through, right? And all of these, if you jump around in genre, if you jump around in themes where it starts out and it's kind of a story about friendship or romance or love, or these are some of the themes, and then something goes awry, and then suddenly the themes become about vengeance and survival or something. You need to know what your themes are. You can have a story that's about friendship and about survival for sure. Like many stories are about that. Most war movies have both of those themes. So, but you need to be aware of it, and you need to preface and like have that as part of your overall arc. So those are some of the obstacles that will happen to prevent a screenplay from having a really strong arc, right? So now let me take a look real quick and see if you have any questions. What's a squirrel syndrome in a script? Yeah, you have too many characters. Yeah. So I hope, did I explain that to you? Okay, Susan. What a squirrel syndrome is, let me know if you got that now. And then Daryl, you have many characters, and it's fine to have many characters. So don't get me wrong. You can have many characters as long as they're not distracting and becoming an obstacle, like an unintentional obstacle for your protagonist. Your characters that are in your script, they're part of their role is to provide some obstacles, right? Your villain is an obstacle. Well, you have villains like the Wicked Witch in The Wizard of Oz is a villain. The wizard in The Wizard of Oz is an obstacle. He makes it much harder for Dorothy. He sends her on all kinds of tasks so that he won't be revealed, right? She doesn't need to go get the broom. He just wants to get her out of his sight. And so he becomes a major obstacle, but he's not a villain. But the witch, yeah, she's kind of a villain, right? So you can have characters that are obstacles as long as you don't have 5 characters that are constantly doing all kinds of, it's just not chaos, right? And it just the big word for this really is intentional, really being intentional about what each character does, really making sure that you have time that we can get to know that protagonist. If we're spending all of our time on all these characters, we're not really spending time with our protagonist. So really balance that. Brian says, is it wrong to point out potentially offensive elements of a screenplay? For example, if it comes across as preachy or condescending to one political party? Yes, it is fine to do that. As long as, again, the same thing, knowing what your bias is. And as long as, so for example, we recently had a coverage where someone wrote about, it was a story that had some political things in it that was really timely. It was set in the 60s, I think. And then some of those things were very timely today. And so, yes, you can comment on this script is, works great because it's so timely, rather than saying it's timely because, and then put your political opinion on there, right? You see the difference? It's timely because we need to change this and this and this in our government. Right. Instead, it's like because of the unrest, or because, we're in a very, there's a lot of conflict going on politically. So we're in this political conflict. And as long as you're saying in our times where we have political conflict, as opposed to saying in our times where that side is lost their mind, you know what I mean? So you can point that out. And you can point it out if it's going the other way, where this script might have problems moving forward because it takes such a strong stance on one political side. See how I say that without it being my side or your side? I say it with this, it might, some people will love it, some people will hate it. Sometimes that's a good thing when a script, sparks controversy. So it depends on how well it's done in the screenplay. If it's just kind of hammering in one side without a lot of, it's not compelling, then yeah, that will hurt it. But if it's a compelling, look at a certain topic, then it could be awesome. Awesome. I'm glad that makes sense. Okay, Daryl, good. So yeah, take a look at your characters and see like how are they moving the story forward. So now let's talk about if you're a writer, and then where this comes in as being a reader is many of our readers, and as more and more people graduate from our programs, some of them are expressing interest in becoming a coach. I am actually a life coach, and I became a life coach so I could help writers mostly. So I could help our readers in our programs, and I could help writers get their screenplay done. I could help our readers get through our program and get out there and start working and start to deal with all the things that happen in your head when you start working in Hollywood, because lots goes on up there. So I became a life coach so that I could help people with that. So as you as you start to write anything, as you're going, if you're a student in our course and you're starting to go through the course materials, these are the things that will stop you. These are your obstacles. If you're a writer sitting down to write your screenplay, these are some of the obstacles. And look at how similar these things are to the obstacles that stop a story from moving forward, right? You're stopping your own story that you're writing, or your own story of your life that you're creating this career, whether you're creating a career as a reader or you're creating a career as a writer. These are the obstacles that will start you from moving forward. Distraction. See how similar it is to squirrel syndrome? So distraction is basically, in a screenplay or in your life, is when you just constantly get distracted by things. And I say it all the time. If you feel like you can't manage your life and you feel like your time is just not your own, that's typically not a time management issue. It's a boundary issue. It means that you are doing a bunch of things for a bunch of people that you don't really want to do. And you're just doing all kinds of things. And you're getting distracted from what it is that you really want. What do you want? Decide what you want so that you can then focus on that. And when if we get distraction, I put other people immediately. So often other people, we think that they're responsible for our distractions. They are not. You are the person that's responsible for your distraction. If someone is distracting you, it's because you are allowing that to happen, right? You're not setting a boundary of, this is my time to work on this thing. You're not figuring out when is a good time that I can do that so that it fits within my family or the people in my life. Often we blame other people for rejecting us. And I'm going to go into rejection in a minute. We blame other people for, I see it all the time out in the world where I see people blaming readers for their lack of understanding of the screenplay. So it's like, we can blame other people all we want. We can tell that this person is distracting me and this person is stopping me and this situation is making it hard for me. But all of those examples I just gave are just thoughts. And this is what I do as a life coach, is help you kind of peel back your brain to be like, is that actually true? Or is that just a thought? Because there's many people that are getting their screenplays done. There's many movies being made. So some people are able to work through that. So if it doesn't happen to everyone, then some people are breaking through, and you can too. So you can look to the people that are doing the thing that you want to do, and you can kind of study them and see, what are they doing differently? And I can tell you, one of the main things they're doing differently is they're persistent. So if you're not living the life that you want, if you're not finishing your screenplay, if you say you want to write every day and you're not writing, what are the things that are distracting you? And then what is your thought behind that? Whatever your thought is behind it is really the problem of what's distracting you. Is if you're thinking, well, I can't do that because this. I can't do that because of this and this and this. All of that is just a thought. So can you start to work on your brain to start to say, okay, what can I do? What can I let go of? What can I delegate? Where can I carve out time? What are you doing instead? Really looking at your days and discovering, what am I actually doing in the times that I say that I want to be building my career? If you're here right now watching this, then you're demonstrating that you value this and it's something that you want to move yourself forward. So kudos to you. That means you're on the right track. Do whatever you did to watch this, keep doing more of that. Whatever got you here, keep doing that so that then you can use that time when you're not here with me. You use that time writing the thing, creating your career, whatever it might be. So sometimes we feel like other people are stopping us because they're rejecting us all the time. And I have to say, if you are out there and you are submitting your script enough for it to be rejected, there you are. You are doing it. You're doing the work. You're in the midst. You're doing the thing. In order to get rejected, you have to put it out there. In order to put it out there, you have to finish your screenplay. So, and if you finish your screenplay and you put it out there and you get rejected, you're in a teeny tiny percentage of people that actually get the work done enough to start their career. So look at it as that you want those no's as much as you want the yeses, because you're going to see like, okay, that's the no. Now, is this a no because I submitted it to the wrong place to begin with? Maybe that's a possibility. Is, what are the no's about? Once you get your script to a place where it can be, production companies are taking a look at it, now it becomes, there's a lot more involved. It isn't necessarily just about being, a good script or not. It's about all the nuances that have to go with that. And these are the things that I don't think people talk about enough. These are the places where we have to learn to manage our mind. And this is why I created all of this, so that I can help you do that. Because if you realize that, yay, I got rejected, that means I'm in the mix, right? And you can go back and you can work on your craft and just keep writing and keep writing. And the more that you can do that, Paul Haggis, two-time Oscar winner, only person in the world to win back-to-back Oscars for writing both of those screenplays. He wrote the first one, which was I think he wrote $1 Million Baby first. He gave it to producer friends because he was already in the industry, and they all said, "Great script, Paul. It'll never sell." So then he went and wrote Crash. Okay, I'll try this one. Same thing. Great script, Paul. It'll never sell. So what did he do? He went ahead and did them anyway. He got Clint Eastwood interested in $1 Million Baby. He directed Crash, back-to-back Oscars. So he just didn't give up. He had that persistence. So if you're getting rejected, you can take the notes. You can go back, definitely get coverage, get notes. Readers, give the best coverage you can possibly be to give that person a step forward, and then celebrate the fact that you're in the mix, right? So the more that we can kind of look at that, each script that you write will get you to the next one. Each script that you will write will improve your craft to the next one. And so we can kind of keep moving forward and keep moving forward. And I really feel like, this is the key, right? Yeah, I love it. Daryl says, so distractions happen to be part of my writing. I flipped the script to a writing add-on. I love it so much. It's so good. Yeah. Awesome. Excuse me. So you'd like to be, I think you mean coached. I'm like, what does that mean exactly? Yes, Carol. I'll give you a link towards the end of this of kind of the next step that you can take if you're interested in learning about this more. And then anytime you have questions, you can just email team@hollywoodgatekeepers.com, and we're always there for you as well. Team, like we're a team at hollywoodgatekeepers.com. So I also want to talk a little bit, I don't want to go too much longer here, but I want to talk a little bit about good versus equal, and that good equals happy. I recently just not discovered, but I have a coach, and she talked about this, Brooke Castillo. She's amazing. And this got me thinking in terms of, we're storytellers here. You know, we are storytellers as a species. We can't help ourselves. We have to write on caves. We have to we can't not tell stories. We're like, I'm going to find this berry on the ground and I'm going to write on a cave because I can't not tell my story. So we are storytellers at heart, right? But I think in many cultures, definitely if you're in North America, a lot of Europe, we have these stories, and we have this idea of good versus evil. You have your good guy and you have your bad guy. You have what's right, you have what's wrong. And one of the things that's really interesting is we're in a place, at least in America, we're in a place right now of that side's bad, that side's good, my side's good, your side's evil. Us versus them is a very common theme in films, especially in movies and horror films, especially in vampire, zombie. I mean, it's vampire and zombie. That is the overriding theme of all vampire and zombie films, are us versus them. You don't want to be, as a matter of fact, you'll kill yourself before you become one of them. That's a very, very common theme. So, and we are sort of raised on these stories to believe that in order to be happy, we have to be good. In order to win, the good guy wins. Like, in order, for good things to happen to us, we need to always be good. And it kind of opens a door for a couple of things. One, it opens a door for us to reject anything that's bad in our lives. And, good things happen, bad things happen. There's all kinds of books about when bad things happen to good people, right? People think that if you're good, bad things aren't going to happen. Bad things happen. Bad things happen to really good people. Bad things happen every day. And if we have this sort of notion that we need to be good in order to not have bad things happen, then we're tripping ourselves up right out the gate. So to be able to sort of accept the overall theme that it doesn't necessarily lead to happily ever after, that we think that if we're good, then therefore we'll be happy. Life is both, happy and unhappy. But when we start to, if we have this notion that in order for me to be happy, then things need to be good. In order for me to feel content, then my life needs to be going well. We can find contentment. I mean, there's so many beautiful books about this, about finding joy through trauma, finding, beauty through ugliness. When we can understand that life has both things, when we can understand that, yes, I might wake up with sadness, anxiety, anger. A lot of the times we wake up, and I've had many as a coach, I see many, many people that come in and say, what's wrong with me? Why am I so angry? I'm angry all the time and I don't know why. Great line from Crash, right? And she's trying to figure out, she's so angry that she's angry, that it's doubling her anger. If we can start to go, yeah, I'm angry. I'm angry about this thing. That doesn't mean I'm an angry person. I'm angry about this thing that happened. But often we get angry and then we're really angry that we're angry. And all we did was just double it. So if you wake up sad and then you're sad that you're sad, I mean, it sounds sort of silly when I say it out loud, and yet it's how many people live. And it's how we tell stories as well. So if we can kind of get rid of this notion, and you're seeing people, I mean, there's been a whole trend of this, Breaking Bad, Shameless, of the anti-hero, right? And so we're starting to see, like, how do people that do bad things, are they bad people? So being able to look at why people do bad things, what is motivating them to do bad things? What is the thing that's making them act on that? A lot of the times people don't feel heard, people don't feel significant, and so they take action in a negative way. Now I have a gun in your face, now you'll listen to me. Right? That can be a way that people act on something because they feel so powerless. And that's a very compelling way to tell a story. And so we have gotten far away from the notion of, good and evil. We had gotten far away, but now you're even seeing stories kind of become a little more black and white and a little more, we're looking at, if you look at like Deadpool, which is extreme, Wolverine, Deadpool, so violent, right? So flippantly violent. And so we're looking at this, like, in some ways it's become muddy, but in some ways it's become good guy and really bad guy, right? So it's like, can we get some of these nuances in our characters? But more importantly to me is that you have that understanding in your life, so that when you aren't getting your screenplay done, when you are feeling frustrated by not getting your scripts read, when you are as a reader trying to get more clients and you're frustrated, to allow that frustration, allow those feelings, and not start to fight against those. Those are just going to be part of it. And the more you can be like, okay, that's part of it today, and I'm going to move forward anyway, the better your life will be. And so that to me is what's important, because the more you understand that, then you're going to naturally apply that to your stories. You're not going to try to force that. If you try to kind of force these notions, I don't know if that would work. Once you understand it and can embody it, then the stories that you read as a reader, you'll be able to give so much better advice, right? You'll be able to see these characters on a deeper level. As a writer, if you can really understand this in your own life, when you go to create these characters, they're going to be more authentic. They're going to be more universal in that they'll be more human. And so this is a really important kind of concept to understand. So now as we look at obstacles for a protagonist, can you see how we can kind of just go back through the list? So that protagonist needs a really strong story structure. And when a protagonist, if things are happening to a protagonist and there's all these subplots provide the obstacle for the protagonist. All of these characters provide the obstacle for a protagonist. We can kind of go back through and look at how a domineering side character can then look at Donkey and Shrek. To me, he's one of the best, most well-written sidekicks, most well-written supporting characters ever, because he's totally is so behind Shrek. And so we're actually doing an event coming up here where we will compare Shrek and the Matrix, because those Morpheus and Donkey are basically the same character. And so we're going to go into that. So when you look at all of these characters that we've been talking about, how are they providing obstacles for your protagonist? And when your protagonist is having an inner struggle, their inner struggle is the same thing we just talked about. They're distracted from what they need to do. They're often fighting internally for them, their own mind, right? Other people are distracting them. They're feeling rejection. They're like, really like, working against feeling rejected or feeling like they've lost something. And something I just noticed on the list that I forgot to mention, when people are rejecting you and they're not liking they're saying no to your screenplay, often what can come out of that is they'll see something about your screenplay that they like. So many writers get jobs like dialogue rewrites. They'll say, we're not, this script isn't right for us, but wow, you really have a knack for dialogue. or wow, this structure on this is perfect. It's not really, I don't really like these characters, but can you do a structure rewrite on this? Can you do a dialogue rewrite on that? So just keep going, because sometimes the rejected screenplay actually becomes a sample for you as a writer to do a rewrite on another screenplay. And that is sometimes a reader will get, okay, we're doing this script. You read that script. This is the film we're doing, the producer will say, but it needs a dialogue rewrite. And then you read 5 other scripts to find which writer is the right fit to rewrite the dialogue on this script. Very common. So see how can just get yourself out there so that you could be part of that whole thing. So forgot to mention that. So when you kind of are looking for these obstacles for protagonists, when you write about what bugs you, when you look back at the things that I just talked about and the obstacles that you have, what are the things that bother you? These are the same things that will create a really good protagonist. So if something about if there's something about the situation as a reader and you're reading the screenplay and it's kind of bothering you, stop for a second and be like, wait, could this be an element that will help this story? What are the things in your world that drive you crazy? These are the things that people will relate to, because most likely what's driving you crazy, it's driving other people crazy too. So you can dive in and really make that work. So we really do, I believe, we create a lot of our own obstacles by the thoughts that we think, like I mentioned before. So a lot of the times, if you think that someone is holding you back, imagine whatever it is they're saying to you that's annoying you, that's bugging you. Imagine them saying that to someone that you admire. Would it bother them too? Or how would they react? Because if you notice that, someone might say something, if we're sitting in a room together and someone says something and you're offended and I laugh, then that means that, I'm having a different thought about what they're saying. It's not what they're saying that's the problem. Or I don't even want to say problem. It's not what they're saying that is the thing to look at. It's what you think about what they're saying. And the more you can be aware of your own thoughts, and I harp on this all the time, think about what your own thoughts are. If someone says something and you say to yourself, that's offensive, and I say to myself, that's hilarious, we're going to then have a different reaction. And from that reaction, we're going to make a different move. You might, sever the relationship, which then maybe that relationship was the person that was going to do your screenplay. I don't know. I might say, that's hilarious, let's talk further, right? So you want to know your own opinion, of course. If someone is offensive to you, then you don't need to work with them. But really be aware of why are they offensive and what is the thought you're thinking that makes them so? And can it be that the thought that you're thinking, and typically, hate to break it to you, it typically has something to do with self-worth. It typically means, I was coaching someone and her thought was often, who do they think they are? And so we dug into that particular thought. Who do you think you are? And she found that she was saying that in her head to lots of different people. When you find that you're saying kind of the same thing, mine is, I've discovered, why are they so mean? I would think that about people and I would feel hurt. I would put myself in a victim space, that they're being so mean. And then I realized, wait, I just said that about this person and this person and this person and this person. It was like, oh, that's me. I'm the one that's interpreting what they're doing as mean. They might not even mean it that way. They're just being who they are. And I'm going, why are they so mean? Which is putting me in a, grouchy mood, or it's making me not feel well. And then I take an action that's moving in a way that doesn't serve me. So the more I can be like, why am I thinking that's mean? And I can start working on my own thought, then the way that I'll feel is way more empowered. When you start to say, they're this, they're this, they're this, they're this, they're mean, who do they think they are? They're holding me back. They're taking all my time. They're stopping me. All of those kind of thoughts. What are you doing when you do that? You're just giving all your power away to all of those people and all of those circumstances. Instead of being like, wait, what am I thinking here? And how can I realize that that's where it is? So as you look at building a protagonist, you want to have them on that same journey. And the more that protagonist can have these realizations about how they're creating their own obstacle, because often they're fighting against some other force, but they're also have an internal battle. The ones that are good also have an internal battle. In Mission Impossible, they say to him, the mission comes first. And he says, I don't accept that. So it's his thought. He could say, oh, you're right. We're all dead. But he won't accept it. It's just a thought, and that fuels his entire action. And we like that thought because it creates a really fun action movie, right? So it's like, but it's very compelling. And so can we, what are the thoughts our protagonists are having? And when you're reading a screenplay, can you see the thoughts they're having? And if you can't, then they're one note and you can help that writer flesh them out more. And really starting to realize through this kind of this good, evil, happiness equals goodness thing, when you start to look at times when you've been through trauma, things that are traumatic, if you've had a tough childhood, if you feel like you're just have so much angst because of something you've experienced, that trauma can also be our strength. That trauma builds a muscle for you to control your thoughts and be able to understand, not necessarily control your thoughts, because I don't want to make it seem like you take out the thought that's negative and be like, everything's great. We don't want that. What we want is an understanding of, oh, I had this really dark thought about this thing, and that's okay. And now I can like, oh, okay, that's okay. And I can just keep writing. You're a superhero because you're a writer, all of you, if you're watching this. So just write it out, give those thoughts to characters, let them act out all your trauma. It can be a way that you can help release some of those thoughts, not necessarily control them, but being aware of what they are. That's the first step. And I think a lot of people live their life without really looking at what their thoughts are. I think writers are already ahead of the game because we're writing thoughts on paper, whether they're ideas or whether we're journaling or whether we're creating characters. We're constantly putting our own words into people's mouths. Like literally, that's what we're doing as writers. As readers, we're doing that for the writer. Here's what we think. So this is a really big deal for us. So the more that you can start to go, oh, wait a minute, this trauma that I'm experiencing, this difficult time that I'm having, this frustration that I feel, these are all empowering moments of me being able to go, oh, this is normal. This is just life. And it doesn't have to be all Pollyanna and great. And I tend to be a pretty positive woohoo person. And sometimes I feel sort of silly because of that. So it's like being able to be like, that's okay. This is what my thought is. This is where I'm at. And I can have all the things and it can all be together. And so as we move forward, are you moving forward with these thoughts? And are you moving forward with an understanding of who you are, what you think, why you have these thoughts, what's holding you back, how many thoughts that you're having that are holding you back, how many thoughts are moving you forward? Are you moving forward? And as you move forward, are you moving stories forward? Are you taking what you're learning in your life and applying it to those writers, applying it to the story, and applying it to everything moving forward? So I hope that makes sense. Yeah, awesome, Daryl. Thank you so much. So I love it. Yeah, true. So it is, if it's ringing true to you, and as we look at things, being able to ask yourself, I have this thought that life is hard. People say that sometimes. They'll be like, oh, life is so hard. Or there's a great line in Hamlet too, where he sits down and he's such a great scene and he's staring at the blank screen forever. And they show a whole montage of writer's block, right? Dancing, doing all these things. And then he sits down and he goes, writing is hard. It's so fun. And it's funny because in that moment it's true for him, but it's not true for everybody. So if it's not true for everybody, and if you've ever studied the work of Byron Katie, she questions, is anything true? Like she's really off the charts on really kind of asking yourself, is that true? Is it true that that person is mean? Like they're my friend usually, or a family member. And I'm like, they're being so mean. And like, well, this is a friend that I chose to be friends with. So I don't think they're actually mean. I think that I'm having an issue right now. So being able to go like, is it true? Is the thought that I'm having true? And would it be true for everyone? The only way that it could be true is if everyone agrees, yes. Good luck with that. So I hope that makes sense. And if you go to, I'm going to send you the replay right away to this so that you can watch this. You can download, and this handout will be there. I saw a typo and I'm going to fix the typo. And then I'm going to add the handout to the session so that you can take a look at it. And then we are also doing a story event where we dive really deep into this. And that's going to be on November 23rd. And so if you're watching this, I know sometimes people come to our trainings and they're watching it at different times. You can still go to this link and it will show you like whatever we're doing having to do with story at that time. But right now, as we're doing this right now at the end of 2024, we are having an event on November 23rd where we will spend all day from 10 to 4 talking about story. We're going to do a really deep dive into values, something I've never done before. I talk about values, but this, we have an exercise we're going to do together so you can really understand how values go into a script. So even if you've come to the story event, it's going to be, we've done this in the past and we've had a great time doing it. And we are going to do some of the things we've done before. But I always feel like even if you've been to this event, it really does solidify how to look at a story. I love doing this. It's where we compare Shrek and the Matrix. And so that's happening on November 23rd. And so you can find out more information about that at hollywoodgatekeepers.com/story. So that will guide you, show you all the details of what's going on that day. And then there's also a thing on the next day that you can join if you want to do that. And that's kind of the next thing that we're doing, all about story. It's one of my favorite things that we do. I'd love to see you there. But we wanted to do also these free trainings. So I'll be sending you a link to this and 5 other trainings that are all free, that are all about stories. So you can take a look at that. And then you can also join us for that story event at hollywoodgatekeepers.com/story. So awesome. So yeah, I'm glad I love, there's something about that story, Don. My LinkedIn live feed froze at good versus evil. What's up with that? It's so good. That's good versus evil. It's like, no, la, la, la. It's so funny. So yeah, so definitely check out that replay. Just keep an eye on your inbox. I'll send it out to you today. If you're not on our mailing list, make sure you get on there at hollywoodgatekeepers.com/story, and you'll be able to join and get on our mailing list. If you have any questions at all, you can go to team@hollywoodgatekeepers.com. We'll answer any questions that you have. I was only going to do 15 minutes, but this is such a fun topic. I really love it. So I hope this is helpful for you as a reader, as a writer, and as a human. I hope that it helps in all regards. Thank you so much for showing up today. Love you guys, and we will see you soon.